Hello, students. Welcome back to our theory classes, the critical theory. So, today we are coming for the very last essay, What is Theory, by prominent professor of English and a structuralist critic, Jonathan D. Culler. Jonathan Culler's contribution to literary criticism is about analyzing and comparing different ideas or the critical ideas coming out, particularly in 20th century. And his effort is to give this literary criticism a status of a theory, because the 20th century is also known for its various theories, from the theories of fine arts to the scientific theories. So he is trying to put English literary criticism or literary criticism in general into this theoretical concept, that why this criticism could not be called as a theory, or if it will be called as a theory, what are the challenges before it. So in this essay, What is Theory, he is beginning by telling that in literary and cultural studies these days there is a lot of talk about theory, not theory of literature, mind you, just plain theory. So he is telling the 20th century is obsessed with the concept of theory. Every new idea, every new innovation that is being put into the category of theory and is considered as some distinct or distinguished body of the knowledge. So he is telling in the field of literature also, people are concerned about this theoretizing the literary ideas. So he's telling theory, we are told, has radically changed the nature of literary studies, but people who say this do not mean literary theory. The systematic account of the nature of literature and of the methods for analyzing it. So he is trying to put this concept of theory into literature by telling that though people exactly do not mean literary theory, but the literary theory that is being popularly conceived by the people of 20th century is nothing but a systematic account of the nature of literature and the different methods applied to analyze this literature. So the popular notion of literary theory is having two parts. One is the systematic account of nature of literature, number one, and the methods for analyzing it. But he is telling that people complain there is too much theory in literary studies these days. They don't mean much systematic reflection on the nature of literature or debate about distinctive qualities of literary language. But he is telling, as in the early part of 20th century, there are too many theories of fine arts or art, and in the middle part of 20th century there are too much theories about science. So he's telling people are now complaining that at the last part of 20th century there are too many literary theories. But what are the literary theories are exactly about? But he's telling that this popular notion about literary theory is nothing but much discussion of non-literary matters. So literary theories are not discussing the literature, they are not serving the literature, but they are serving to analyze the literature from the non-literary point of view. What are the non-literary aspects associated with big literary theory? And he's also trying to bring out the distinct concept of these theories by telling that there is too much reading about psychoanalytical, political, and philosophical text within the literature. So the theory is a bunch of names. So there are so many names in 20th century, in second part of 20th century. Michael Foucault, Luce Irigaray, Jacques Lacan, Judith Butler, Louis Althusser, Gayatri Spivak, etc. Now he is telling, then what is theory? That if all these non-literary things like psychology, politics, psychoanalytics, they're entering into the literary text, or they are being found out within the literary text and within the purview of theory, then we have the necessity to pinpoint what is theory. So he's telling that theory in literature or literary theory is exactly not like a scientific theory, like the theory of relativity. So theory can be about certain rational development of ideas culminating or resulting in a particular decisiveness, a particular decision. That is scientific theory, like the theory of relativity. But he is telling, even if these theories, if we look at that, these theories, they were mostly speculations, because empirical science, most of the time, I have told you that the empirical science, from where the modern science evolved, it was based on speculation. And from speculation, the scientist will go on developing the ideas, go on proving those ideas, and finally will reach at a decisive conclusion. So he is telling that if we take a theory or any theory in this world, so the primary component or primary characteristic of every theory is speculation. Then he is telling that what is speculation? Speculation means guess. But if we guess certain thing, it cannot be proved. It cannot be called right or wrong. So speculation is not exactly something right or something wrong, something true or something false. Therefore, he is telling that, page 276, last part, a theory must be more than a hypothesis. So, when the scientific theory is analyzed, we find that the scientific theory is at least divided into three parts, that is, speculation or hypothesis, the analysis or experiments, and the conclusion or the decisiveness. So he's telling a theory must be more than hypothesis. So theory is not hypothesis. The theory is more than hypothesis because it is having the other two parts, the analysis, the experiments through which we try to prove certain things as right, or if it is not right, then what could be the right one. It can't be obvious. It involves complex relations of a systematic kind among a number of factors, and it is not easily confirmed or disproved. And the theory also involves, therefore, from the hypothesis, it evolves towards complex relations of a systematic kind. That means we go on speculating, we go on working on the speculations or the hypothesis in a systematic manner. And we also want to prove by a number of factors that our speculation is right. That is an attempt within the theory, in the second stage of the theory. And it is not easily confirmed or disproved. And these experiments, these analyses, they can't exactly prove or disprove anything. And only in scientific theory, later on we come to a conclusion. But that conclusion is also not conclusive. For example, I am giving you a simple example of scientific theory, that the theory of gravitation or the gravitational pull. So when Einstein developed that theory, he undertook so many experiments, and finally he said that anything that is released within the atmosphere will fall down on earth, because earth is having the gravitational pull. But the thing is that, in spite of its conclusion, its decisiveness, there are also exceptions. So, a theory never proves anything in a final sense. So, he is telling in page 277, beginning, theory in literary studies is not an account of the nature of literature or methods of its study. It is a body of thinking and writing whose limits are exceedingly hard to define. So, bringing that concept of experiments within the theory and its final inconclusiveness, is telling that theory in literary studies is not an account of the nature of literature. So, literary theory doesn't deal with nature of literature. That means what should be the nature of literature or methods of literature, or how it should be studied, that is not mentioned in the theory. Rather, it is a body of thinking. Literary theory deals with a body of thought and writing about those thoughts, which are exceedingly hard to define, which are very difficult to define. Suppose, for example, we have gone through the uh, new critical theory. So, in new critical theory, the writers, they have a definite body of thought, from Eliot to others. All of them are moving towards a conclusion that text is independent of the author. That we should focus on the text. What is there within the text is the text, or it is the summum bonum of literature. But at the same time, can we say conclusively that they are the final authority, and after that nobody can question the veracity of their thought? No. If that would have been final, then after new criticism, excuse me, other thoughts, other literary theories would never have cropped up. So he is telling that the most convenient designation of this miscellaneous genre is simply the nickname theory, which has come to designate works that succeeded in challenging and reorienting thinking in fields other than those to which they apparently belong. So, in context of literary theory, we can say that actually by name it is theory, but in these theories, what we have done, we have brought some work or designated some work which have challenged and reoriented the thoughts from other than the literary field in applying to literature. That means we have psychoanalysis, we have linguistics, we have structuralism, we have feminism, we have colonialism, so many things. They are not part of the literature. They are not the part of the literary text. When Shakespeare composed his poems, his sonnets, or his plays, he was not aware of all this. But later on, we are using all these new thoughts to challenge the text, to reorient the thought within the text, to find out that if the text is conforming to some of these newly evolved thoughts, and then we can say that yes, there is the element of feminism, element of colonialism, element of this, that in Shakespeare's plays or sonnets. Therefore, he is telling works regarded as theory have effects beyond their original field. So, in this way, what happens? The works that we are applying to literature as theory, they have effects beyond their original field. Take, for example, Sigmund Freud's psychoanalysis. So, Sigmund Freud developed psychoanalysis to analyze human dream, to analyze human impulses, human desires, human behavior. But where he is using that theory, we are using those theories, those ideas of Freud, not with living men and women. They are being employed by psychiatrists or psychologists to living men and women, but we are using it in literature, which already we know that literature is neither true nor false. It is a general reflection of the social experience. So it is being used beyond their original field. Then he is telling, page 277, last sentence, theory in this sense is not a set of methods for literary study, but an unbound group of writings about everything under the sun. So he is telling, then in the field of literary theory, we do not have a set of methods for literary study. Literary theory doesn't give us the idea how to approach literature, how to study literature, etc. Rather, it is an unbound group of writing. That means they're not very identical thoughts among themselves. They're different thoughts. If you are studying feminist theory, then different feminist critics have pointed out different aspects of feminism, and they have applied it to literature to justify their arguments. So it is an unbound group of ideas or writings, and it varies from most technical problems of academic philosophy to the changing ways in which people have talked about and thought about the body. So it can vary from technical problems of academic philosophy, how philosophy will be applied to academics, to the thought about the body of the text. Therefore, the genre of theory includes works of anthropology, art, history, film studies, gender studies, linguistics, philosophy, political theory, psychoanalysis, science studies, so on and so forth. So, we can apply any of these field, any of these works from any field of any domain of knowledge, from anthropology to sociology, geology, into the literary text, and they come under the literary theory. Works that become theory are for accounts others can use about meaning, nature and culture, the functioning of the psyche, the relations of public to private experience, and of larger historical forces to individual experience. Therefore, he is telling that uh, people who are not studying all these different disciplines of knowledge, for them, the arguments from these different aspects of knowledge produce different suggestiveness. And in this way, we can say that we have different meaning of the same literary text, where we can discover nature, culture, psychology, and so many things that we can apply to it, and in relation to public and private experience, because literature is a combination of public and private, individual and society. So both in individual and social level of the literary text, we can apply all these different domains of knowledge, and through that we can derive different suggestiveness or meaning. Then Kuller is telling what are theory's effects. He is telling that the main effect of theory is the disputing of common sense. So he is telling the most visible effect of theory is disputing the common sense. That means when you go through a poem or a drama or a novel, suppose you have not gone through any theory, you simply had gone through a poem. Just you look at the example of a very common rhyme, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. So when we were taught Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, we didn't have any idea. We were very small to have any idea, or somebody will be hesitating to give us any idea about Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. How I wonder what you are. These were very simple suggestiveness, very simple common sense meaning. The stars are twinkling in the sky. Therefore, it creates a sense of wonder in us. So, as children, as small children, we were also wondering how beautiful, how mysterious they are. They are created by God and these things. But when we will apply, when we grow up, and now if we apply different domain of knowledge, suppose for example in Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, we will apply the concept of feminism. What will happen? As a literary critic, you may be putting a question, sir, why Twinkle Twinkle Little Star? What is the gender of the star? Or what is the gender of the poet? How the poet is appropriating the star? The stars are twinkling and they're attracting. So, is the star a female body? Is the star like a feminine existence that is attracting our attention? Or is it male? It is twinkling and it is attracting. Or if we appreciate this particular rhyme through psychoanalysis, then why the question is that every twinkling things attract our attention. Suppose you are going through a very good street in the evening, and all the lights, street lights are burning bright, you won't mark. But in one of the posts, a light is twinkling because it has come to its end of life. Immediately that will attract our attention, or if we gaze towards that particular light, twinkling light, it may make us irritable. So, what happens? By applying psychoanalysis, by applying feminism, we can interpret different suggestiveness or meaning, and in this way disputing the common sense. So the effect of literary theory is to dispute, is to contradict, is to go beyond the common sense meaning. And he's giving certain points. The conception that the meaning of an utterance of text is what speaker had in mind, or the idea that writing is an expression whose truth lies elsewhere in an experience or a state of affairs which it expresses, or the notion that reality is what is present at a given moment. So, theory can give us all these questions, that whether the meaning in the utterance of the text or the writings of the text is the real meaning, is the limited meaning in the mind of the speaker. When the speaker is telling, my love is like a red, red rose. So, had the speaker in his mind the image of red rose as something very lovable or an idea of attraction, or it is an expression whose truth lies somewhere, or when he was telling my love is like a red, red rose, his sense, his idea that he wants to communicate was lying somewhere else. That means the red rose is having the associated thorns along with it. That means a sense of difficulty in achieving the love with the beautiful woman that the poet is falling in love with. Or it may give the notion that reality is what is present at a given moment, or that his beloved is really like a red, red rose, means whose skin is very red, red or reddish or pinkish. So, theory can put so many questions before us. Therefore, theory, he is telling, page number 279, theory is often a pugnacious critic of common sense notions. You know the meaning of pugnacious, that means which is quick to argue or fight or quarrel. So, theory is immediately quarreling or questioning or arguing the common sense notion. If Shakespeare in his sonnet has written that my friend is lost to the treasury, the hidden treasury of time. So, the theory immediately puts the question, what is the hidden treasury of time? How can you say it is hidden treasury of time? Time is not hidden, time is visible. We are very much conscious of time. So, there must be two times, one time which is visible, another time which is invisible. So, in this way, he is telling theory is often pugnacious. Then he is telling, as a critic of common sense and exploration of alternative conceptions, theory involves a questioning of the most basic premises or assumptions of literary study. So, theory is a critic, that means a body of ideas that of or critical ideas of common sense and explores the alternative conceptions. Theory wants to bring out alternate concepts out of the literary text and its common sense ideas. And it involves questioning of the most basic premises. What is the most basic question that is being asked? If you take, for example, any love poem of John Donne, general common sense is that Donne is in analytical theory or feminist theory may question the sincerity of Donne. If Donne is really in love with his beloved, why Donne is asking about the rising sun to go somewhere else, do that? Why he is being distracted? That means he is not treating his beloved as a proper adult. He is trying to distract the mind of his beloved. That means his mind is somewhere else. So, in this way, we can prove that John Donne is actually not in proper love, in deepest of love with his beloved. He was simply playing with the emotion of his beloved. So, theory can ask the basic premises or assumptions of literary study. And then he is giving two examples, two related but contrasting cases which involve critics of common sense. He is trying to prove this idea by giving examples of Michael Foucault on sex, and another is Derrida's idea about writing. So, what he is telling? He is telling that Foucault writes the notion of sex made it possible to group together in an artificial unity anatomical elements, biological functions, conduct, sensation, pleasure, and to make use of this fictitious unity as a causal principle, an omnipresent meaning, a secret to be discovered elsewhere. So, Foucault, in his writing, is putting the basic question that people are talking about sex, then what is sex? Is it something which is having a very common and very obvious idea? He is telling that it may be some anatomical element. Anatomically, we are biologically, anatomically, we are different. Therefore, we are telling someone is male, someone is female. So, when a child grew up, how he how the child came to know that someone is male and someone is female? Because every child in his psychology, already we have gone through that part, that every child is bisexual. So if a child is bisexual, how the child comes to know about the notions of sex? So is it through anatomical element or biological functions or conducts or sensations? So how it will be derived? So Foucault is telling that the omnipresent meaning of sex, it is a secret to be discovered everywhere, that it will be discovered everywhere. Where means in the society, in the socio-cultural behavior. That is telling that sex which came to be treated as fundamental to identity of the individual, then by a crucial reversal, this thing called sex was seen as the cause of the variety of phenomena that had been grouped together to create the idea. He is telling that every individual in the society commonly believed that he or she is having an identity, a sexual identity, a male or a female. But how this idea of sexual identity is derived? It is derived not by any single thing, any single experience, but by so many things. When the child grows up, the child learns from the parents or from the people in the society that there is a boy and there is a girl. The boys are different from girls, the girls are different from the boys. And gradually, when he learns of, he goes through the study, he studies about the anatomy and he finds the distinction for himself. Then also, his mind may not be having that psychological distinction. Both may be becoming friends, both may be playing the same games, both may be sharing the same things. But then gradually the social forces or the social behavior is filtering into the mind of the individual through different customs, social customs, the religious rites, and other functions, that there are sexual identities. And there are also other things. So, in this way, Foucault is telling that sex is constructed by the discourse linked with various social practices and institutions. The way in which doctors, clergy, public officials, page 282, social workers, and even novelists treat phenomena, the identity as sexual. So, by going through the novels, by going, by learning from doctors, by learning from the clergies, by learning from public officials, social workers, gradually our idea, our notion of sex is getting complex and determined. But these discourses represent sex as something prior to discourse themselves. But these discourse, all these ideas coming from different fields, from different aspects of our living experience, they represent sex as something prior to discourse themselves. That means before these ideas also there was a common sense notion about sex, and all these discourses, they are conforming our ideas of sex, and they are also redefining the ideas of sex, bringing more complexities into that idea. Foucault's analytical analysis treats sex as an effect rather than a cause. So here, the analysis of sex, it is an effect of the discourse, the social discourse, what we learn from the society, that the effect of that is the idea of sex than a cause. The product of discourse which attempt to analyze, describe and regulate the activities of human being. Therefore, we can say that a theory is a discourse that analyzes, that attempts to analyze. So, what is a theory? If the theory of Foucault, as we can take from this example, that theory is a product of discourse that attempts to analyze, number one, number two, describes and regulates the activities. So, in this way, Foucault's analysis is an example of an argument from the field of history that has become theory because it has inspired and been taken up by people in other fields. So, Foucault says, when we grow up, we know historically the identity of the sex. Someone is male and someone is female, because historically the society has divided people into male and female. But from that historical idea, we evolve towards the theory of sex. That means sex includes anatomy, sex includes psychology, sex includes different experiences, religious, cultural, social, so many, and so forth. And as a result, it becomes a theory. Then he is telling in page 283 that a characteristic of thinking that becomes theory is that it offers striking moves that people can use in thinking about other topics. So, if theory is a discourse, and if theory offers striking moves, giving us some striking ideas about a particular aspect, then people can use that idea about some other topics. We can apply that to other topics. And in this way, he is telling that theory is creating a resisting power. Theory is also creating a resistance. That when we are theoretizing, suppose Foucault's theory of sex, we are creating a theory on sex, it is also being resisted by some people. As you know, that in our time, there are so many things when some people are telling why that girl is putting on such dresses. It is not becoming of a girl. So what happens? We are trying to theorize, and immediately there comes the resistance. People also argue, no, why a girl should not put on a dress like that? Why a boy should not have such long hair? So theory is also creating its own resistance. And he is telling that, therefore, from historical constructions, theory moves towards the analysis of concept, which is genealogical in nature. In the second example of theory, he is giving the theory of Derrida on writing. That already we have gone through Derrida, and Derrida had said that human speech or human writing, they complement each other, because some people say that writing complements speaking. That means speaking is always incomplete by its sign, When we write, that can be more elaborately expressed, and the sign of language more elaborately being recorded. But Derrida is also questioning that whether writing is the supplement of speaking or speaking is the supplement of writing, because both are proved in their own context. Sometimes we say what I say, it is exactly not what I want to convey. So when I write, I become very concrete in my communication. But sometimes also it happens, yes, I wrote that, but exactly I didn't mean that. Had I been speaking all these things, my gesture, my look, my movement of the eyes, my movement of hands would have conveyed the meaning. Suppose you have written, "Good morning, sir." But how I accept that "good morning, sir"? I will accept it, yes, good morning means any general good morning. But if somebody is angry on me and will say, "Good morning, sir," or somebody is very indifferent, or he is simply our teacher, why should I be careful? Okay, "Good morning, sir." Look at the thing. The speech is also complementing the writing. So, writing and speaking, they are complementary to each other. And in this way, he is telling, does writing complete speech by supplying something essential that was missing, or does it add something that speech could perfectly well do without? Writing consists of signs that introduce the possibility of misunderstanding, since they are read in the absence of the speaker, who is not there to explain or correct. So, both the situations are plausible. And Derrida, in analyzing Rousseau and Rousseau's writing about this in his essay Confession, he is telling that writing, it consists of signs that are not transparent, do not automatically convey the meaning intended by the speaker, but are open to interpretation. So, in this way, Derrida is trying to justify that a theory is not giving us a conclusive idea. A theory is rather a body of interpretations which can also be used for further analysis and further introspection. And Derrida writes, there emerges a law that on of an endless linked series, ineluctably multiplying the supplementary mediations that produce the sense of the very thing that they differ. So Derrida's theory, you know, the deconstruction. In deconstruction, what happens? Because of the endless linked series in the argument, there is no finality in argument. This literary arguments where we use other domains of knowledge to interpret literature, therefore it multiplies the supplementary mediators. The supplementary mediation is multiplied, and as a result, what happens? They differ. The meaning differs. The meaning we can't arrive at finally. So it is a deferred meaning. Therefore, everything begins with intermediary. The more these texts want to tell us of the importance of the presence of thing itself, the more they show the necessity of intermediaries. So, the more we are going through the text, we are finding more and more intermediaries. Therefore, what we learn from this text is that, page 289, last sentence, the idea of the original is created by the copies, and that the original is always deferred, never to be grasped. You remember Orientalism. Orientalism is created to grasp the meaning of Occident. So, The original is always deferred because the idea of original is created by copies, by the intermediaries. So the original is never grasped. We can't reach at the original suggestiveness in the literary text. That is the idea of Derrida. Our common sense notion of reality as something present and of the original as something that was once present proves untenable. So, in this way, he proves his idea of deconstruction, and he is telling that from this point of view, if we look at a text, there is no outside of text. When you think you are getting outside science and text to reality itself, what you find is more text, more sign, chains of supplements. That is the idea of Derrida. So, Derrida offers a reading or interpretation of texts, identifying a logic at work in a text. Foucault's claim is not based on text. In fact, he cites amazingly few actual documents or discourses, but offers a general framework for thinking about text and discourse. So, in this way, what we find from both Foucault and Derrida, Derrida is trying to identify logic at work in a text, and Foucault is trying to cite actual documents or discourse within the text. But from the work of both, what we come to realize? We come to realize that to Derrida, the theoretical literary works are creatively productive in case of Foucault and discourse of knowledge, but to Derrida, these are purely theoretical. So to Foucault, it is discourse or creatively productive, but to Derrida, it is discourse. Therefore, in page 292, Culler is telling both examples of theory illustrate that theory involves speculative practice, accounts of desire, language, and so on that challenge received ideas. So, theory is involving, from the beginning, we have discussed speculative practice, speculation, accounts of desire, what we want to discover within the text when we are using different ideas, feminism, colonialism, psychoanalysis. We, this is our desire, we want to find all these things within the text, and so on and so forth. Therefore, he is telling theory makes other arguments analogous to this one. And in page 293, he is telling, so what is theory? Four main points have emerged. Number one, theory is interdisciplinary discourse with effects outside an original discipline. So, number one is theory is interdisciplinary. Other ideas, other branches of knowledge must be applied to make it a theory, and it should be a discourse with effects outside the original discipline. If we are studying literature, we must apply non-literary ideas into literature. That is theory. Number two, theory is analytical and speculative. Theory means it must be speculative. We must speculate that I will find these things within the text, and I will analyze. Analytical and speculative. Number three, theory is a critic of common sense. Again, it is a critic of common sense. What is the common idea within the text? We are going to analyze and destroy those common sense and bringing some new meaning. And number four, theory is reflexive. Theory is reflexive, thinking about thinking. So, what the poet was thinking, the critic is thinking about the thought of the poet. that whether that poet was thinking about his beloved, or he was thinking about the rising sun, or he was being distracted by the soldiers of the king who were after him. So thinking about thinking. So these are the four important ingredients of theory. Therefore, he is telling, as a result, theory is intimidating. So theory is threatening, theory is intimidating. Whom? Theory is intimidating the literary text. The theory is also intimidating the common sense, the common meaning. Page 294, theory is thus a source of intimidation, a resource for constant upstaging. So theory always upstage, improves the text, adds into the text. The text is becoming bigger and bigger, broader and broader. So a small poem becomes a very long narrative because we have applied so many theories into it. And the second paragraph of 294, the unmasterability of theory is a major cause of resistance to it. And he's telling, then why people are resisting to theorizing or these literary theories? You people are also resisting theories because it is so difficult, sir. Or what question will come in the exam? Why? Because it's unmasterability. Nobody can master the theory because there are endless domain of knowledge, and all these things can be applied, and there are so many new thoughts even in one single domain, new ideas coming into the speculation of the text. Therefore, he is telling in the final page 295 that theory makes mastery impossible. So you can't be the master. I also cannot be master, nor even the greatest critic in this world will be the master. Nobody is a master of theory. Therefore, don't worry. The nature of theory is to undo through a contesting of premises. So the main nature of theory is to undo, is to disintegrate the text and postulates what you thought you knew. So the effects of theory are not predictable. So we can't predict. By applying this particular theory, we will come to a particular result or particular meaning. You have not become master, but neither are you where you were before. So you can't be the master by applying theory. But one thing is guaranteed, that your position has changed. Before applying the theory, what was your thought? Now you have changed. You have gained something, gained some insight into the text. Therefore, he is telling that this is the application of theory. This we should read theory. Why should we read theory? That at least we can move forward in our appreciation of a literary text. Okay. So now we have come to the end of this paper.